I am the beginning, the end, the one who is many. I am the Borg.
The Borg are known as one of the most evil creatures in the Star Trek franchise, and they have gained quite a reputation as cybernetic villains who are spread across all quadrants. These creatures have very mysterious origins, but there are a lot of speculations about their history and background. It is even suggested that they were initially sentient beings who slowly advanced to greater evil after gaining access to cybernetic technology. Today we will explore all the possible origin stories and speculations regarding their creation, and tell you all about these evil creatures that plague the Star Trek universe. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What are some possibilities regarding the creation of the Borg? The Borg are known for their famous slogan, which states that resistance is futile. And they were also part of a hive mind civilization known as the Collective, whose aim was to discover new worlds and then steal their technology and resources. They typically have gray skin and a number of cybernetic implants in the form of tubes and wires attached to their faces. They also had a common aim of assimilating any new life that they discovered, and this assimilation process essentially referred to the way by which they would turn any life form into a part of their collective. After finding a new being, they would capture them and inject them with Borg nanoprobes that would paralyze them. After these beings gave up control over their body, the Borg would take them to a chamber where they drilled into their skulls and installed cortical implants that went through the strengths, weaknesses, knowledges, as well as memories. The Borg then used this knowledge to determine how one could serve the collective in a useful manner, and they accordingly performed surgical procedures to fit these recruits with adequate cybernetic implants. The Borg also ensured that the circuits were conscious throughout this procedure, as they needed their knowledge and creativity. Eventually, the recruits would become one with the Borg and the collective, but this happened only after the Borg used up all their distinct features. While these creatures were feared across the universe, one does wonder where they came from and what their origins are. A very simple theory surrounding their origins was given by the Borg Queen, who stated that the Borg were just another sentient species in the universe whose mission was to create a perfect world by assimilating other species into joining the collective. The Borg went on to attack a huge number of species, and they had even assimilated over 10,000 species by the time they appeared in Star Trek Voyager. Let us explore some of the other theories surrounding these creatures. No true origin theory. One theory suggests that the Borg do not have any true origin story and that no Borg existed as a single entity. Instead, the Borg are just the way by which civilizations keep evolving and prevent themselves from going extinct. Essentially, the Borg keeps looking for new worlds and resources and then assimilates beings from these worlds to enhance their knowledge and creativity. In this way, the Borg and their collective keep evolving and prevent themselves from going stagnant. If they only included one civilization, the Borg might become a classic example of groupthink where every single entity in the collective agrees with each other's opinions and makes no new progress as a civilization. To prevent this, the Borg has no true origin, but it is actually the way by which several different civilizations give up their free will to join the collective and ensure that their culture keeps evolving. Furthermore, the collective also need to assimilate outside their culture to ensure that they don't fall prey to groupthink and keep updating themselves by bringing in fresh recruits who are knowledgeable and creative in their own ways. Theories surrounding different versions and incarnations of the Borg. In Star Trek canon, an episode of Star Trek Voyager titled Dragon's Teeth speculates that the Borg were first seen in 1484 AD. During this time, the Borg had control over very few planets, and they operated from the Delta Quadrant. This does not establish that the Borg first came into existence in the 15th century, but instead just indicates that they had already been assimilating other planets and resources during this time period that takes place around a millennium before the events of Star Trek Voyager. On the other hand, the Star Trek Destiny novel states that the Borg's origins can be traced back to the Kalear species, wherein they merged to form the Collective. However, we will explore the full extent of this theory later. An episode of Star Trek Next Generation titled Q Who has a different story for their origins, wherein Guinan, as well as the Borg Queen, give their account of the Borg's origins. According to them, the Borg was a blend of organic life and artificial life that was held together by cybernetic enhancements. Guinan even stated that the Borg had been developing for thousands of centuries. Other canonical sources, including the Star Trek The Return novel and the 1999 short story titled The Hunted, state that the Borg had stirred up quite a lot of trouble by assimilating worlds all across the Delta Quadrant. The Borg also ended up clashing with an ancient species known as the Preservers, and this incident is documented in the 1991 novel known as Star Trek Vendetta, as well as the 2001 Voyager comic titled Planet Killer. These sources suggest that the Borg threatened the Preserver fleets and even almost drove them to extinction thousands of years ago. Even within the canon stories, there seem to be some discrepancies, as the Borg are shown to be powerful creatures that assimilated a number of planets over time, while at the same time, a different source states that they had only begun to take over planets in the Delta Quadrant around the same time. The Borg may seem like significant enemies in older story arcs, while also appearing as minor villains in story arcs set in later timelines. One possible explanation is that there are multiple incarnations of these creatures and that they simply pose different levels of threat at different points in time. Most recently, we have encountered them in the Voyager series, where it is estimated that they assimilated over 10,000 planets. These incarnations could either be different species altogether, or they might just be different versions of the same species. By following this theory, the Borg can be considered to be a kind of II virus that has spread all over the Delta Quadrant after originating from one single point. Over time, this virus may take over other quadrants, die down, or even disappear until a different mutation appears and restarts the assimilation process on an entirely new planet. Kalear Theory. During the events of the Romulan War, the Columbia was attacked by the Romulans, but they somehow managed to survive the war. The Columbia did suffer a lot of damage, and they sought the help of a nearby star system to recover from the war. They hoped that they might find some species that would help them acquire some resources, but they came across a strange, reclusive species known as the Kalear. The Kalear were an ancient sentient species with advanced technology, and they declared that the Columbia could not leave now that they knew about the Kalear's existence. The Kalear species was also essentially immortal, as their bodies were made out of a programmable matter known as katoms. These katoms also came together to form a hive mind, but all Kalear members did retain their individuality even if they were bound together. This species had also created a number of cities on their planet, and all these species acted as spaceships that were powered by Omega particles. When Columbia approached them, they were just finishing up a grand project that had helped them discover a new species that had been building Dyson spheres. The Kalear were going to communicate with these species by using a transmitter that they had just turned on, but they soon received a strange signal that disrupted their new technology. As a result of this mishap, one of the city ships started flying off in their subspace corridors, while the Columbia ship was also trying to escape from the Kalears. Moreover, the strange signal had caused feedback in one of their stars that had caused the star to turn into a supernova. While their subspace corridor could only accommodate 3 ships at once, the rest of the city ships were destroyed by the supernova. Out of the 3 ships, one traveled back in time to the beginning of the universe, while the second traveled 1,000 years back in time. Finally, the 3rd ship suffered a lot of damage, and it crashed on a planet in the Delta Quadrant. The ship consisted of some survivors, including some Kalear and some Starfleet crew members, and they soon realized that they had also ended up traveling 1,000 years into the past. Since there were very few survivors, so that the katoms within their bodies would provide enough energy for their other survivors. Finally, the last Kalear approached the Starfleet crew in a moment of desperation and proposed that she would share all of her knowledge with her if they allowed her to use their biological processes to charge their katoms. When the crew refused, she ended up forcing them into following her wishes, and she then took over their bodies. In this manner, the last Kalear survivor created the Borg Collective out of 3 members of the Starfleet crew. She later orders 2 of these drones to kill the 3rd one, and they later discover a full planet of humans who can be assimilated into the collective. In this manner, humans became the first species that were assimilated by the Borg Collective. Borg and nanotechnology experimentation theories. There are also a number of novels that suggest that 3 entirely different species had turned into the Borg due to some experimentation with nanotechnology that went wrong. According to one such novel as Star Trek the manga, the Borg was created when an experiment in the field of medical nanotechnology went awry. When an alien species realized they were on the verge of extinction, they created a repository satellite with test subjects who had infused body parts belonging to several species. They also performed some cybernetic enhancements on these test subjects by using advanced experimental technology in a medical facility inside a black hole. The satellite functioned with the help of nanomachines that were also linked to the test subjects. As the medical facility began deteriorating, the nanomachines also started acting up and even began infusing themselves with the patients. Eventually, the entire satellite fell apart, and the test subjects started acting in strange ways. One of the test subjects was the daughter of the satellite's head researcher, and she soon assumed the role of the Borg Queen, while the other subjects displayed Borg-like features and also seemed to follow a hive mind. As the story ends, the corrupt nanomachine is completely infused with the test subjects, and the Borg Queen states, "Resistance is futile." Existence of the Borg Queen. At some point during the Borg's history, a Borg Queen established herself as their leader and decided to bring some order to the chaotic existence. The Borg Queen ensured that the Borg were not entirely dependent on the collective and could retain their individuality while serving the hive mind. The Borg Queen issued commands while living in the central nexus of the Borg Uni-complex in their space. Borg drones that came from different planets also started making a common appearance, and they were exposed to nanoprobes that would cause them to lose body hair and develop gray skin. They also made great advancements in technology and developed Borg ships as well as trans-warp hubs that allowed them to travel across the galaxy. The Borgs Encounter with the Federation and Captain Jean-Luc Picard. While the Borg seemingly existed from the 15th century, they continued to assimilate planets and resources in the Delta Quadrant before expanding to Beta and Alpha Quadrants as well. It was around the 24th century that they started emerging as a major threat, and the Federation only started becoming aware of their existence in 2365. In the meantime, two exobiologists named Magnus and Aaron Hansen set out on a journey to locate the Borg, and they finally even managed to come across a transwarp hub. They followed the Borg throughout the hub and were finally captured by the Borg, who soon assimilated them. The Borg also captured their young daughter named Annika and put her in a maturation chamber until she grew up and became a Borg. In 2365, Captain Jean-Luc Picard and the USS Enterprise D finally started looking into the Borg when a member of the Q species approached them. The Q species had exiled one of its members, known as Q, who approached Captain Picard and joined his crew. The Q species kept a tab on the workings of the universe and sometimes even manipulated certain events. But Captain Picard was of the view that they should only learn about the things taking place in the universe by exploring it. Q wanted to prove Picard wrong and then transported the Enterprise D around 7,000 light-years away. They even ended up traveling away from Federation borders, where Q finally pointed out a cube-shaped ship filled with Borg. Q introduced Picard to the Borg and told him about their relentless nature and evil plans. Q earned Picard that the Borg might even hold power to destroy the Federation, and that the more the Starfleet traveled away from the Federation, the more likely they were to face more dangerous threats. In the meantime, the Borg were already responsible for some destruction of certain Federation, as well as Romulus outposts. But these events had gone unnoticed by the Federation. Finally, Captain Picard also ended up losing 18 members of his team due to a Borg attack before Q returned them to their base. After 2 years, the Borg cube was spotted in Federation space and appeared to be moving toward the Earth. This time, the Borg managed to capture and assimilate Captain Picard, but the headstrong leader showed a lot of resistance during the assimilation process. The Borg finally decided to make him the Locatus of Borg and send him as a representative during their missions to capture other local species. In the Battle of Wolf 359, 40 Federation ships came together to defend Earth from the Borg cube, but Captain Picard helped the Borg defeat the Federation. At the end of the battle, 38 Federation ships were destroyed, while the Borg cube suffered no damage. Finally, the Enterprise's crew managed to capture Picard, and they soon used his cybernetic Borg implants to establish communication with the Borg cube. This process caused some malfunctions on the Enterprise ship and soon led the ship to self-destruct. Captain Picard returned to his usual self, but he was still haunted by his time as the Locatus of Borg. The Federation and the Borg fought each other on numerous occasions and even traveled through time to prevent the Borg from taking over the Earth. Voyager origin story. Another theory suggests that the first Borg was created by the entity known as Voyager, who was undoubtedly one of the most extraordinary entities that ever came in contact with the United Federation of Planets. Voyager was essentially a vehicle, but it is quite unlikely that it created the Borg because it viewed any humanoid or a carbon-based creature as an infestation that we need to get rid of. By this logic, Voyager seems quite indifferent to the entire concept of Borg or their agenda. This theory also does not make sense, because Voyager's path goes through the Klingon territory while the Borg seems to mostly operate from the Delta Quadrant, which lies in a completely different location. However, non-canon stories that are included in the Star Trek Encyclopedia do state that there might be some connection between the Borg and Voyager.
But that ship...
What is the purpose of the Borg and what controls their actions? Essentially, the Borg is a part of the hive mind known as the Collective, which is made up of a huge number of individual entities that are assimilated into one mind. They don't have any unanimous leader, and they only serve the Collective. Their sole purpose is to seek out new worlds and then steal their technology and biological distinctiveness, and then add it to their own. They typically do this in order to enhance the Collective's intelligence, knowledge, as well as creativity. They also believe that they will create a state of perfection if they assimilate the knowledge and resources of a huge number of species. Furthermore, they intend to share their perfection with the universe and simply want to make the world better for everyone. While the Borg believe that their way of assimilating others into the Collective is what will help the world become perfect, they don't realize they are the bad guys. In their view, they think they are the good guys, and that their actions of taking over new worlds and stealing their resources are actually for the betterment of the world. Conclusion. To sum it up, there are a lot of possible theories regarding their origins, and some of them seem more likely than others. In any case, there are also a lot of paradoxes surrounding their existence, and we can only speculate about their origins. At the end of the day, the Borg have established themselves as one of the deadliest villains in the sci-fi genre, and they are truly quite a force to reckon with. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.